Welcome to episode 501 of the Red Dirt Agronomy podcast. I am Dave Deken. That's right, we've been signed on for a 5th season to be here with you on the podcast airwaves. Now, if you were in Enid this past weekend, we hope you stopped by our booth at the Enid AgriFest and said hi. Well, truth be told, many folks just stared at us as they walked by to get to the Oklahoma Wheat Commission's booth to get some of those amazingly delicious cinnamon rolls and whole wheat bread, all of which was made with wheat grown right here in Oklahoma. Now, actually, we had a great time talking with folks as they stopped by to visit with the doctors about many of the things that were happening on their farms across the region. We are kicking off this 5th season with a conversation style that many of you may have had at your home with your family over the holiday. Well, that holiday being Festivus. You know, it's the end of the year and all of your uncles have had a lot to get off their chests and they're just waiting for the right time for everybody to get back together. Well, we're all back together, so get ready. This is going to be a fun conversation. Just a reminder, you will be able to find all of the information we talked about in this episode and past episodes at our website, reddirtagronomy.com. As always, we start with a quick trip around the table for an introduction to the dream team of dirt and everything that grows from it. Let's start with Oklahoma State University Extension Precision Nutrient Management Specialist.
No, nuke them all, kill them all.
Dr. Brian Arnall. And next to him is Oklahoma State University Extension Cropping System Specialist.
We were arguing in our office earlier this week, and we're like, no. Yeah, because Dave's not here to record our arguing.
Oh boy, Dr. Josh Lofton. Let's kick off our conversation recorded with the doctors on January 9th, 2026 at the Oklahoma Wheat Commission's booth during the 2026 AgriFest in Enid with a crop update. You are listening to the Red Dirt Agronomy Podcast. And of course, we're at the Enid AgriFest again. They invited us back, and the Oklahoma Wheat Commission is kind enough to get a booth for us here.
Cinnamon rolls.
Cinnamon rolls are diagonal, and it has been I was asking the folks, they did 17 trays of cinnamon rolls, and
I had 1.5.
Right.
Trays? Yes.
Well, and they.
I'm surprised you're awake. Comatose.
He passed out earlier. We had to nudge him.
I had him pour extras icing on top.
There you go. Gosh. Well, if you're going to be passed out, you might as well, enjoy it there
properly.
But yeah, we're here again. This has been a lot of fun. A lot of folks have stopped by the booth and actually got autographs and pictures with the doctors of dirt and everything that grows from it. And
I haven't signed a thing today.
I'm the one that's always taking the picture for you guys, so it works out really well. And but no, it's been a lot of fun. And you guys are. Let's go ahead and jump in with a crop update because it's been a minute since we've done one of these. So what's happened since the last time we spoke?
Dave, it's January.
Yes, it is.
It has not rained.
I don't think anybody needs us to answer any more questions besides the fact that it's January.
Okay, so
but it has felt like June.
It just felt like June. We have been fighting armyworms, running through wheat fields the last couple weeks, which is odd for
in January and December.
Yeah. The fact that it's not been cold, it's been a little windy, and we haven't gotten rain for the bulk majority of the state in over a month, I think is really what tells the story.
I did get a note from P. Diddle. Actually, Raiden Sherry was telling me he was talking to P. Diddle. They have, in the last week and a half, received and confirmed tan spot and rust and powdery mildew out southwest Oklahoma.
Already. Wow.
So, I mean, it's shaping up. And this time of year, I went out and saw a grower field just a week ago, and I've looked at fields as we've gone past them. Some of them still look really nice, but in certain parts of the state, just things are going backwards. But January is just a really weird time to look at things because it goes through the gamut of. It's hot. It's been a little cold. We've gotten some rain, but not enough rain. Things are drying out. It's windy. January's just not the best time to kind of assess a crop. And, just a little bit of rain in the next month will solve a lot of issues. Dave, was that the dinner bill?
Well,
yeah.
I was thinking maybe we got our donations matched in the next hour, but
that's kind of what it sounded like.
Right. Somebody got a tote bag.
Josh, talk a little bit about the canola fields that you visited, and a little bit of kind of along the lines of what you said, that it might be one of those points in time where we need to put the sun visor down and move beyond.
Yeah, well, and probably a little bit in the wheat fields as well. In that it's been through a lot. We've seen the crop go through. Just talking to Josh Bashong a couple minutes ago about why is canola turning this purple color, and he's like, we've done so many evaluations and so many things to try to figure out why it has, and we still can't figure out why canola turns this purple color. So it's one of those things that the canola, if you have a field of concern, the biggest thing right now is, do the new leaves look pretty good? Does the crown look pretty good? And if both of those things are yes, then we're okay right now. And it's like I told the grower last week, is that it's not saying that we're going to be good in March. It's just right now we're pretty good. So we still have some promise, and we still have some things. We have a long, and I'm using air quotes here, we have a long winter to go. Hopefully we'll be a little more favorable on cooling down a little bit and providing either a good snowpack or some good moisture along the way, and that'll help things out a lot.
It seems like every crop has that 2-week window of magic where everything has to go right. When will that be for a canola crop?
I mean, when we start to, I would say that we've already passed that on making sure things get established, but I think canola has a couple of windows that have to be shot in the right direction for it to work. The other really big one that's still in front of us is, I would always say, green up. Yeah. The year that we had probably the best looking crop going in and maybe the worst yield potential coming out is, I think it was like 2018, 2019, to where we warmed up really fast in February, so the crop got going, but we still hadn't caught a lot of those winter rains or snows. And so we had very limited moisture for it to work with, but it's hot. And so the biggest thing is, can we regrow some of those leaves that we've lost in the winter? And if we can't, then we have very limited resources to grow the rest of that crop. If we can, then we're typically working pretty good. So that's kind of the one that's still in front of us, is if we can get good amount of moisture when we start that green up process over again. That's the same with wheat, though. We want some good moisture to get some tillers out. If we didn't grow tillers in the fall, get some tillers out to get that head count up. It's kind of what we need. So that green up period is going to be important for both of our winter crops. And if a grower maybe missed the boat on wheat or missed a boat in something and they're looking to plant spring oats, typically is that same general time frame is when things start warming up a little bit. If we don't get those rains paired with that big spring warm up, then that's when we walk backwards on the crop pretty quick. So that's kind of what we're looking at. But again, I feel like we say this every year because we're in the same. Brian had to remind me. December's typically one of our driest months in the state, and so we've been through the driest month. Hopefully things get better in January and February, and that we're working pretty good. But we're still perfectly fine, just fine right now. There's nothing that concerns me overly right now on everything, but if we don't improve in the very near future, we could get very concerning very quickly.
What are we looking at as far as the root growth goes? Because I mean, in drier years, the roots tend to dig in deeper and draw the plant to be more stable, especially whenever you have a 800-pound calf steer pulling on it. And are we going to see benefits to that, or is that been an issue this year, you think?
Well, and we just got back from our sorghum meeting here at KNID, and talking to some folks that are grazing or have grazed or have already pulled the cattle off, and I think a lot of that is going to be when you actually got it planted, because there are some folks that are saying that, my wheat's really good and anchored, and probably those are the ones that still look okay, is something that's accessing a lot of deep moisture if they have it.
Yeah.
But there are some growers that maybe got planted a little bit later, whether it's because it was too dry and it didn't emerge, or because it was too wet and they couldn't get in.
Yeah.
But didn't get it in, and they're saying that they're starting to get some, even a crop that looks like maybe it would have a good root growth to hold in, the animals are still pulling it out. So a lot of it's going to be depending on where and when and what conditions you were planting. Again, hopefully, if you got it in early enough, you escaped that early season armyworm issue, and you had a good amount of growth, and the animals are still out there that were still good and rooted. But that is a concern, because a lot of our growers had to go in a little bit later because they didn't want to deal with armyworms,
right.
or they had to replant because of armyworms.
What we're getting closer to Topdress season. What should producers be thinking about as far as that goes?
Rigs have been running since basically Christmas.
Right.
I've already called a lot of folks. It's a combination of what do I have time for, how many acres do I need to cover. So, are you reliant upon a co-op, or do you have access to do it yourself? Co-ops right now are trying to push hard to cover acres because they have a lot of ground to cover. It's a tough time of the year for me with wheat Topdress. We're getting into the window that I say the efficiency of it really starts bumping up. So once you start getting into late January, really the go time is February and March.
Right.
It's the best time. But I look at it as I had a call. Now is not, you don't have to push in bad weather. So the bad weather would be before, this is Friday. We had a rain event Wednesday. Had some calls early week looking at maybe putting out fertilizer that Saturday, Monday. Problem was soils were very dry, but we were getting dews. We're getting frost, and then the days 70. And this was Northwest. This was Alva. So we're talking, hitting 65, 70 degrees, having 15, 20 mile per hour winds, and you have a dew setting on urea on a dry soil. Those are the perfect conditions where you're going to blow off, 15 to 25%. And so now we have the leeway to at least play a window of like, maybe I should avoid this scenario that is high loss potential. Which are those days that we have we don't have soil moisture, we have a dry soil, we have dews and humidity. If we're dry and dry air, it's not that bad. But if we're combining, like in Stillwater, we got an inch. To go out today and fling urea is a bad idea, because we've got soil moisture that's going to melt that prill, but we don't have moisture to move it down, and we're going to probably be 55, 60 today. And so, just watch the loss. We've got some time. Don't get yourself in too much of a bind, but it started to be go time.
Well, so let me be the doomsayer on the corner with my my sandwich board here. So, we're just the middle of January. We got a lot of time. Odds are we get cold again. What if we don't? When is that time that we, like you said, we have some flexibility in our timing because of the normal progression of a wheat crop. At what point in time, if that wheat crop starts to come out of dormancy, are we needing to start ringing that bell going through the town square? So
you really have to look at it where I'm not going to switch a whole lot of timing up. We start growing. And we're still Daylength, right? We're still looking at that sun. We're going to start having biomass. We're going to have the heat. If there's enough moisture for grow, we're going to have that biomass production, which will get us to our conversation about yellow wheat and good or bad.
Right.
I'm still going to stick to, from the work that I've done. I've been doing this for 20 years now. We've had years like this where we never really cool off. In my time frame, it never really impacted the optimum timing as far as the plant is concerned. Does it impact the optimum timing as far as the system and my management? And when I plant corn, or I need equipment free because I got my summer crops going in and I got good conditions, 100%. But the wheat plant itself isn't as reliant.
Well, and you talked about a biomass issue. compared to maybe 10, 20 years ago, we're going into winter with a lot less biomass.
100%.
And so when do we get to the point to where we need to put it out to grow some biomass? That way there's some resources built up before we go into – so maybe not thinking when do we need to fertilize for reproductive, but when do we need to fertilize because we might not have that window of biomass production before we go reproductive? Or are we weeks and months off that still?
If you'd ask me, my answer today is different than my answer 6 years ago. My answer 6 years ago would be we need the nitrogen on now. And it needs to be there and available so we don't lose any spring biomass production because I need, as you mentioned, sorghum, I need that plant to be a collector of sunlight and heat. And if I'm pulling biomass back because I don't have the ability to grow early spring when I come out in mid-January, February, and start producing, then I'm immediately sacrificing yield. The work is showing that at least the wheat plant itself, and I think it's because it's so capable of adapting the number of heads, the number of spikelets, the berries produced, doesn't seem to be as driven by that early biomass that I would have said a couple years ago. That was Joao's work. Is I came into Joao's dissertation saying that we can get behind to a point and never catch up. We can lose so much biomass we can never catch up. I've not found that point if I can fertilize by hollow stem in a wheat crop. Okay. I have had deficiencies on November 20th at Perkins Deep Sands, fertilizing in March at hollow stem and still cutting 80 bushel wheat.
Okay.
Wow.
So that goes against everything I was taught in every class, in every agronomy session ever. Now, am I telling a farmer to do that? No. But it for me, a lot of that answer is it gives us a wider window. If things aren't right, don't push the wrong button again.
So we're not at town square yet. We're not ringing the bell quite yet.
No, and I like little wheat through February. That early February, when it starts growing, that's when we start thinking about it. And really, the second we start seeing that growth, if we've got good weather events to apply, let's then start looking at it.
Since we last chatted, you guys have been updating the OSU NPK blog site. So what are you putting out there?
Okay, Dave, sit down before you.
Yeah. And you're talking about us doing a radio show? Is that supposed to be live?
Okay. Yeah. So
we will be.
So during the break, I kind of was updating some of my lectures, and this whole.
Is that what academics do when you're on break? You sit around and say, how can I improve my lectures?
It's what we should be doing. Yes,
should be doing.
It's not what Brian was doing, but.
Anyway, so
after we were given the CCA training, we talked to growers, and a lot of that CCA training from an agronomic standpoint is how do you know when the crop is at a specific growth stage, and then what is going on physiologically within that crop, and from a management perspective, what are we doing? And so a lot of discussion that I have with some of those guys that are taking the CCAs, guys and gals that are taking the CCAs, and then I was sitting back here thinking we talk about it from the students, but maybe we lose some perspective after we get out of the classroom about why do we decide to do – you were talking just a second ago about when's that – well, actually, I was talking, but you were giving me follow-up on – when is that time from a agronomic physiological standpoint that we need to be really concerned because we don't have the resources available to for that crop to do what crops should do? And so I released a blog, or actually I gave you a blog and you released it, that was talking about that we are managing not what you see. Growers, when we decide to make fertility management, when we decide to make input management. So think beyond planting. We've already planted the crop's up and we're growing. It's all those inputs that we're adding in alongside of it, is we're actually managing what's called a primordia, and not what the crop you actually see. Now, for those of you like Brian that don't know what
like plants, I'm a soils guy,
that don't know what primordia is,
throw me in there too.
Dave knows what it is. We've talked about it recently.
Okay, well, good.
Along with the pine tree.
There you go, the pine tree. Yes,
yes, the great pine tree.
You should go on the Dave Deken tour.
We should
fill you
probably not take such long gap between visiting. This leads to chaos.
Right.
Good night. Okay, so a plant will develop cells, so they'll go through cell division.
I do remember this. Okay,
So a plant will go through cell division and will make cells in preparation for growth.
Yes.
Most of the time, at certain stages, we kind of know what that growth is going to be, but the plant itself doesn't. It's making cells to grow, and those cells could eventually differentiate, is what we call it, but those cells could eventually become leaves. They could become stems, leaf sheaths, whatever that plant needs. And so until we differentiate, until that plant actually says, this is what we're going to do with this cell, we have no idea. Oh, my God, Jerry May's going to listen to this. He also knows about primordia, so he could come in.
I'm a primordia brother. I know what this means now.
But so we have these cells that are dividing and evolving, and it is what we're actually managing. So when we throw nitrogen out, when Brian's trying to make these decisions on when we put nitrogen out, it is to make sure those cells are continuing to divide. That way, when we say, okay, we need this many leaves, and now we're going to reproductive structure, that we're not deficient on those cells to therefore make a head, make grain, make anything along those lines. So the whole perspective of we have 19 leaves in corn.
Yeah.
Well, I don't think we often have 19 leaves in corn in Oklahoma, but the genetics of that plant is going to divide the cells for 19 leaves. Now, when we don't need it, we only need 17. It's just going to differentiate those cells to something else. So those cells are now going to go into the tassel production or pollen production, because they're just cells that plant is. And so I released a thing that we really do a lot of our management based on managing those dividing cells and not what we see in the plant. So when we talk about our critical nitrogen, it's not that you necessarily see a deficiency in the plant, or we necessarily see the need, that nitrogen that is eventually going to come to be used in the plant. We're not seeing that part come around yet, but we're prepping to make sure that those cells are available when we have it, so we don't have a deficiency in cells and we're trying to catch up. So Brian talked about catching up biomass. It's kind of what we're doing more on a cellular level. So when we talk about this is when you need to fertilize, this is when you need to put herbicide out so competition is not there. We're doing it on this cellular level and what's happening. And I think corn is probably the best example of this, because at V4, V6 is oftentimes when we say that this is the plant, this is the time to where we don't want the plant to stress out any longer.
Right.
Or we want to start minimizing that stress as much as we can, and we minimize that stress all the way through tasseling, pollination, and seed development. And so why we're doing that is at V4. So think about a corn plant that's only got 4 leaves out there.
Yeah.
That the what is going to eventually become a corn cob is being differentiated at that point in time. By V6, we have determined how many rows that corn cob will have and the potential of how many corn kernels will be within a row. So when we talk about 14 by 40, that gets set when we have 6 leaves out there.
Wow.
So when we talk about the need for nitrogen, if we are deficient and that plant is deficient, then we could go from a 16 by 40 down to a 14 by 32 or a 14 by 28 or a 12 by 24. And then at that point in time, we're trying to maintain as much as we have instead of gaining more. Because once that cell gets differentiated and we only have a certain number of cells to produce that, we can't add any more at that point.
Okay.
So we can only take them away.
Yeah.
So where do excess resources go? Well, they go to seed weight then at that point in time. But our number one factor that impacts yield is grain number. From there, it then can fall to grain density, but the number one factor is grain number. So if we are lower on grain number, we are inherently setting ourselves up for lower than the genetic potential allows. Now, Brian, on the other hand, will argue the difference in environmental potential. So this is a difference between the genetics that crop can make versus the what the environment is affording us to be able to make.
Can I ask a question here? And this may throw it all off, but when does that clock start? Is it when the seed is in the ground? Is it whenever the seed is in contact with moisture, and then it starts that genetic clock of cells and everything?
So the moment we see a germination and we see that green plant, we are already starting to dictate how many leaves that plant's going to have.
Okay.
Mm-hmm. And we are starting to differentiate the leaf material of that. And the plant might say, okay, I'm not stressed. Mm-hmm. My genetics is to make 19. Mm-hmm. I'm going to make 19 leaves. Okay. So it makes the primordia for 19 leaves, and we've differentiated cells, beginning cells, to make 19 leaves. Now, if a stress comes along later in the season and we aren't going to be able to make 19 leaves, we're only going to be able to make 16 leaves, that plant can then break down those cells and use those resources for something else. But that process is not 100% efficient.
Yeah.
So we are going to lose energy making those and differentiating those to break them down to remake them and differentiate them something else. So our energy conversion is not one-to-one. So we are losing energy during that process. So we only want to differentiate realistically what we're going to use.
Yeah. The joke I've always had, or thing to explain some of the genetics, is if you look at a bag of winter wheat that's produced by anybody that we run in the state of Oklahoma, that bag has a genetic potential. If it were to be grown in a growth chamber and all that, it's going to put up 160, 180, 200 bushels of wheat. The thing I've said is, if let's go west, let's say we're in Kingfisher. The second you open that bag up and the air in Kingfisher hits it, it goes, we're at 100. And then you throw it in the red soil that's been eroded and at a pH of 4, and it's like, okay, 40. Right, that's just the stressor. So we have this G, and that's the conversation we get into, is we have this G. One of my, I guess, arguments or things that I've been trying to figure out, and just in my own head, is that sometimes I think when we push for the full potential, the genetics, and Josh kind of said this a little bit, we start creating more things than we can support, and there's certain situations where we can create too much. We can create too much biomass. We can create too many tillers. If I'm looking at a wheat crop and I create, let's say a plant creates 15 tillers, which is a lot, but it creates 15, but only 6 make.
Okay.
That's a lot of energy put into those lost tillers that could have been easily converted, and the 6 that made could be larger. So what we're seeing on the wheat side, and there's really two conversations, wheat and corn, and it's kind of fun because they're so different.
Yeah. By
getting some early season stresses that are actually taking it from the genetic potential, and we're stressing with water, we're stressing with nitrogen, we're reducing the biomass. So maybe it's not the yield potential, but we're definitely reducing the biomass potential, the plant potential. We're getting it closer to that environment, because our environment is not a 180 bushel wheat environment. Our environment is going to be something under that. If I can train it closer to that environmental potential, I can be more efficient with inputs, and my job is input efficiency. And so that's the conversation. With corn, though, we have the same. The thing is that if I am happy having yellow wheat, okay. I was taught in class that you should never have deficiency in a field crop.
Right.
But I find deficiency leads to improved root or smaller biomass. I am reducing one component, but I am changing the physiology and how that plant's growing, and in the end I tend to harvest more. We've seen some of it with corn, but I don't know, we have this back and forth, so now it's Josh's turn.
Well, so I was waiting because there's a very nuanced term that I think you used. And the reason why we wanted to do this is because we were arguing in our office earlier this week. And we're like, no. We can't talk to each other about this because we're just going to argue on the podcast now.
Because Dave's not here to record.
Yeah, because Dave's not here to record our arguing. So there's a nuanced term that I think you used that I want to highlight. And so you used it synonymously. And I don't know if you caught it. Dave, you probably caught it.
Yeah.
You probably got it.
Absolutely.
What is the difference between stress and deficiency?
As a soil scientist, I'm intrigued what a plant, because this is the conversation I get in when I'm talking with Amanda and Brett, is we always argue about ideas like this because I see it as differently. For me, a deficiency is a stress. A stress is commonly, you have the abiotics, but a stress, whether it's drought stress, whether it's a nutrient stress, whether it's a light stress or a heat stress, is a deficiency. You also have stresses of insects and pathogen diseases. So in my world, a deficiency is always a stress.
So I think you're right on that. So it's the fingers thumbs situation, right?
Yeah.
And all thumbs are fingers, but not all fingers are thumbs, right? So a deficiency is a stress, in my mind, from a physiological standpoint. A deficiency is a stress, but it is an elevated stress. So at that point in time, you are limiting resources. And you kind of talked about it. And the thought that you are... And so there is a concept, and there's a back and forth, and I think wheat lends itself to playing around with that concept a little bit more because those windows are a lot bigger.
Yeah.
So we're talking about the difference between delaying nitrogen application in wheat could be months.
Yes.
In corn is weeks.
2 weeks.
Yeah. So we're looking at a much more narrow window. And so when you talk about, to me, when you talk about a deficiency, you are limiting resource development. And therefore, if you are limiting resource development, you are limiting potential of resources to go into that grain.
Agreed.
Stress is a good thing.
Yes.
I think stress is a great thing because that triggers that plant to go out and try to find a resource. Right. And so, and we kind of talked about this, is there's a difference in this perspective on holding off inputs or not holding off inputs depending on what you're talking about. When we're talking about weed management, when we're talking about competition from weeds, when we're talking about insect management, when we're talking about things that are actively physically taking away from that crop, this is not where we're talking.
No,
Those should
kill them all.
Those should be based on an economic threshold where you're going to get a return on investment and everything. So a weed is a bad weed. It doesn't matter how much. It's just how much money are you going to get back when you make that application. That's your decision mechanism. Right. When you put out nitrogen or when you put out water is the mechanism that we're talking about here. Because if you are nitrogen stressed, that plant's going to go try to find nitrogen.
Yes.
But if you are deficient, what you end up doing is you are limiting root growth. You are limiting growth, which includes root growth. So you become deficient enough to where you are, when you are kind of walking that from stress to deficiency, you are taking that next step down the line.
I would say that's a G issue. That's a genetic issue because some of the genetics do, when nutrient stress, do say, I'm stressed and shut everything down equally, proportionally. There are some, we've shown in multiple crops, there are some varieties and hybrids and genotypes that say, I am stressed, I'm going to absolutely reduce my above ground. And so everything above ground is going to be really taken back. I'm going to reallocate. I'm still going to have less total production, but I'm going to reallocate that stuff from the above ground and push below ground that much harder. It's a very genetic. I've seen some cotton plants that if you stress slightly, they just give up shop. They're just like, I'm done, I'm out, forget you.
Yeah.
And I've seen some cotton plants that will, in a matter of 2 or 3 weeks, you go from what should be an 8-10 inch tall plant to something that's 3 inches tall, but we have 4 times more root mass below ground.
It's trying.
It's just reallocating to a different zone. And wheat's been the same. There's some wheat that just likes to explore when stressed, and there's other wheat that just sits there and is like, I'll just wait.
So in talking about this, we're also bringing another nuance to this system.
This is so. Yeah,
I think we're 3 nuances into it.
Yeah. So how does a cotton plant grow and produce, and continue to grow and continue to produce?
Indeterminate versus determinate production.
That's kind of what we're talking about.
We are getting some of that.
So with cotton, we do kind of tend to walk that line between indeterminate and determinate, right?
Yeah.
With corn, we are not that way. We are pretty linear in that growth pattern, in that if we are continue to accumulate heat resources, we're going to move to that next stage, whether that crop is ready for it or not. Sorghum again walks that line kind of like cotton does, because we can use those resources to make tillers and not. But so the big thing that I wanted to do with that blog is to discuss that when we are resource limited, when we are stressing that plant out, that can be a good thing.
Yeah.
When we are creating a deficiency, I think that's a bad.
Well,
and
go ahead. Sorry.
No.
I was going to say, and that's why we see in stressful years we see adjustments in the protein levels in wheat and different qualities like that, right?
Well, that's source sink. So that's the ability of a plant to move either carbohydrates, create carbohydrates in the grain, or move nitrogen, which is protein.
Yeah,
they're the same. Move nitrogen from the plant into the grain. So it's more of ability of that plant to move things around than it is.
Well, and actually, me and you talked about it. Sneakily we talked about that. I was trying to get some hints out of him on what we were talking about, and so we. I was writing through a manuscript and talking about when we take it from a forage perspective, is there a time to where when we always talk about that if we have a drought, we are going to kind of hyper-concentrate that nitrogen that we accumulate to create either proteins or nitrates. Right? Is there a time to where that doesn't happen?
Oh.
Say that again. Is there a time that we're not?
If we have a limited drought, so if we are drought stressed and we are at that moderate, we often kind of condense that biomass down a little bit to where we create maybe hypersaturated protein or maybe even a nitrate issue, but we are still taking up nitrogen, but we are not creating or converting it to biomass as effectively, right?
Yeah.
Is there a situation where we end up not taking up biomass, so then our protein goes down along with our biomass?
Man, you've got me. I'm processing through.
This is the issue because we had one in a project that was with Dr. Summit and his student Harsunjam, to where this concept of it was droutier and our biomass decreased, but so did our protein.
Wow.
And we were at the verge that it was because that we were so dry during these times that we were not taking up nitrogen.
Yeah.
And so we have moved from a simple stress to almost a deficiency perspective on that, which ended up not benefiting the plant whatsoever.
So riddle me this, Batman. Where do you transition physiologically between this stress and deficiency? What is that? If I say I can have yellow wheat, which is at least a stress, nitrogen deficient wheat.
Get off of wheat here, man. Get off.
Let's go back to sorghum then.
Let's go to corn.
I've done this in sorghum. Okay,
because I know the exact answer for corn.
Okay, so I have done this in corn. I've had yellow corn, and then I make it green again. What point does it transition from stress to deficiency?
What leaf was yellow?
1, 2, 3.
Okay, so you have a mechanism there. How big was the crop? What was the stage?
V7.
Okay, so V7, we're probably have the ear leaf exposed, but probably not fully developed. Yep. That's kind of on the verge, and what we're still talking about is stress because our nitrogen demand is not really high. Potentially, we are limiting what protein can be established, but we are not limiting the resources being developed. Would you allow a corn ear leaf to become yellow?
No.
That's a deficiency.
Point of reproductive organ.
The point to where the resources available for what eventually will become critical, whether that's biomass and forage and protein or whether that's corn and a grain, that's deficiency.
So we need to reevaluate and reterm what we call deficiency, because anybody sees yellow leaf, first leaf go yellow in corn,
they'll call it
a deficiency. And that's what I've been taught.
And I think that leaf is deficient, but not the plant.
Not the plant. So we're reducing overall biomass production. We're reallocating, which is the beautiful thing about nitrogen, because you are reallocating from that lower leaf up to the new leaf.
And it goes into this concept, and it's one of those things that we always the reason why we did this and the reason why we intentionally wanted to argue about this is we're going back to simple concepts, very fundamental concepts that make these things come around. And we talk about Liebig's law of the minimum. It's probably one of the first things you talk about in fertility class is what's limiting your growth. And so I think that And again, there's some nuance to it.
Yeah.
I think at the time, if we're talking solely a corn plant, I think at some point in time, if we are getting yellowing chlorosis, we are getting a deficiency of that leaf, and that leaf is a critical leaf, such as a corn ear leaf. Now the plant itself is becoming deficient. Okay. If we are deficient in that first leaf, let's say we got a V7 crop and that first leaf is deficient, one, you don't know what that's deficient from. It could be shading, it could be moisture, it could be nitrogen, but you don't know. It is creating a nitrogen deficiency, but that could be because that plant is deciding it is no longer producing enough resources, so I'm going to eat through the protein and redistribute that protein up. By the time we get that on an ear leaf, we know for sure that indifferent of what it is, it's causing a yield impact. And so it goes back to that Liebig's law of the minimum. What is the limiting factor that we have there? And that's why there's some nuance
and the
to
nuance,
this.
I think you said, and I want to reiterate it, because the nuance also goes back to the Liebig's law, if you look at it in the way it's taught, which this is, Dave, we always show a picture of a barrel that has staves of different heights. And whatever the lowest stave is the maximum we can produce.
It's basically at what stage does the water start falling out of a barrel?
And you're not going to fill it beyond that lowest stave. Well, in most cases, we're thinking in the terms of grain. But in reality, when we're seeing that lower leaf, it's not grain, it's biomass. And so, we are limiting. We're deficient in terms of biomass production, but we might not be deficient in terms of grain production and final grain yield.
Yes.
And so what are we really talking about the limitations on?
Well, and that's what's your intent?
What's your intent? I mean, we'll go back. Are we talking?
Why do you fertilize 150 pounds for dual-purpose wheat in the beginning?
Grow a whole lot of biomass.
Because that's what you're interested in. Yeah. You would never do that on grain because that's not going to convert 1-to-1. And so you're fine with a small wheat plant that's a little yellow going into winter because, one, there's a decent chance we lose that leaf.
100%.
We don't want a lot of tillers because there's a decent chance that tiller's going to slough off and it's going to be redistributed somewhere. And so, that is not impacting grain. But typically where we design the management decisions, and this goes back to this blog post that we have, this primordia is typically pairing of this is when these factors start impacting what you want, i.e. grain.
And as you mentioned the blog post, I want to go back to that's the first. We're going to have a series. This is going to be probably a conversation that hits multiple levels. And what you don't get, I would highly recommend people to go read that blog post to get this if they're interested in this.
And please reach out.
We're going to, and you might even redirect how our conversation goes. I see this as being multiple back and forth, or both of us writing together as we do this. Josh has put out kind of an outline for follow-up, and I don't know if it's going to be follow-up by me or follow-up by him, but this is an intriguing conversation.
The funny thing is he came into my office, and I was sitting there working on something else, and he starts drawing on my whiteboard, and I was like, do you need something? And he goes, not yet. I'm accumulating my thoughts, and was drawing on, and he goes, okay, now I need you. And so I'm like, oh, okay, what? And so we have this nice little graph of these 3 levels, and this is what the second one I think is going to be all about is genetic potential, environmental potential, and realized yield. And we don't want to shoot for this genetic potential so high that our realized yield goes low, but if we only are shooting for the environmental potential, we're probably also going low. And so there's this back and forth that we have to go. We have to somewhere be between environmental potential and genetic potential and go for there. And the reason why I know this is how do we get nitrogen needs based on a green seeker? How do we get yield potential based on a green seeker analysis? Dave, do you know that?
I have no idea.
It's biomass. Biomass produced per day is a big part of it.
In your thought, Bill Ron came up with it, and it took me a long time to think of it. Whenever you're looking at yield, whenever you're looking at what you're going to apply in the enriched strip, it's yield potential what?
Yield potential times responsiveness.
What yield potential plus 33%.
Okay.
And that's what's always been taught.
And
it's because you don't want nitrogen to be the limiting factor.
Right.
And so we base this off of splitting the difference between genetic potential and environmental potential, because if we shoot for environmental potential, we'll probably always fall short.
Right.
in our environment, if we shoot for genetic potential, we'll always fall short. And so it's where do we shoot in between those two that makes everything work.
Yeah.
And sometimes at the beginning of the season, we have no idea, which is why these in-season applications are so helpful, because it gives us a better gauge of where that season is. But it's that back and forth on we want something to be really good and that we have a good idea in season. But the reason why Brian says that, like, when delayed sorghum, it's 30 days.
Yeah.
Once we get to 45 days, we're losing yield.
Right.
Why? Is because a lot of those factors start differentiating at 30 days.
Wow.
And so that's why we want that to be on by 30 days. We have flexibility all the way up these first 30 days. Yeah. But the reason why we can't go, oh, well, what's 10 more days? 10 more days is a lot.
Yeah. Yeah.
And if we're stressing, that's 10 days of stress.
Yeah.
And that 10 days of deficiency level stress. And that's a big deal. And that's what I wanted to get through with this, is that these management that we're coming, that are these more advanced management practices to where we are stressing the plant out little by little,
right,
in a verge to try to get a better idea on water, how much water we're going to need in season, how much nitrogen we're going to need in season. We have to be pretty strict with these values now, because we are playing a game of risk, if you will.
It is.
Yeah.
And 5 days, 10 days makes a big difference. When we're doing it at the beginning of the season, 5 and 10 days don't matter that much.
Right.
But when we are doing these advanced level, 5 and 10 days make a big difference.
But it's one of those things, and this is a conversation we get into and this isn't an Oklahoma conversation. This is what I do when I go out of state, and I like stir the pot, and I leave it for the state's agronomist. But
does that with me sometimes. Don't make it seem like it's only out of state.
We look at it, and the producers have to choose what risk aversion they're at and what are they risk adverse to. Are they risk adverse to yield loss, or are they risk averse to input cost?
Right.
Yes.
Right now, we have a little bit of it's when grain prices are high, it's always yield loss.
Yes.
And if you go to the Corn Belt, it's yield loss.
Yes.
If you go to the High Plains irrigated, it's yield loss.
Yes.
There is a different world in the center of Oklahoma through Kansas, that there's a larger conversation of input risk.
Yes.
And that's what we play with. And there's some farmers that are still yield, but there's a lot that are input. So you have to take into what level of risk. And as you do things, I guess my end take home is that we can be accurate or we can be precise.
Right.
Accurate is a 50-50 split. I'm going to go with 50 pounds pre-plant. I'm going to go 50 pounds top dress in January, February. That is accurate. That's going to hit my maximum yield in winter wheat from the majority of our country 90% of the time. Is it precise? Absolutely freaking not.
Right.
We are probably 40 pounds off, and timing is off.
Yeah.
I can really flex my ROI if I try to be more precise. But as you do precision, your magnitude of risk of you being wrong, like Josh is saying, is there's a fine line of where are we choosing the G and the E, and how do we attain that?
Right.
That level of risk of topping the yield out does increase, and your management has to increase. You have to be planned, and you have to plan, and you have to be adaptive. And so there's a lot that goes on when we start talking about these increased management decisions on what we're making for in-season recs, rather than just going out, if I'm corn, putting down everything pre-plant and just managing insects and weeds after that.
Yep.
Well, guys, this has been a very in-depth conversation. Folks can find your blog. We'll put a link to it on the website. And and we're walking away from this conversation still friends, so that's good.
Oh, we were going to do that anyway. This is a normal. This is a Thursday in the office.
This is why we have the podcast, is because we were told we need this recorded.
Right.
Yeah, this is not anything new for us.
If anybody ever gets the chance, they should stop by their office in Ag Hall, because I go by there quite a bit, and I mean, these conversations happen all the time. But that's where this actually builds from, and it's great for the end producer. So.
Well, it's the funny thing is we've talked about it for a long time, is that the one way we get a very unified front when we go talk to growers is that all of us agree on everything, is that we have these conversations in private on saying, you don't know what you're talking about. And it's one of those things that we've come, I don't know, we've never come to blows, but we've gotten very aggressive on conversations, because when we leave that room, it's got to be because it's an Oklahoma State stance. It's no longer our stance. It needs to be an Oklahoma State stance. So these are fun.
Yep. You guys work it out so that way
both of us agree, at least in principle, on everything.
We agree to disagree and just go forward with it that way.
Thank you for listening in on this conversation of the Red Dirt Agronomy Podcast. Again, if you get a chance, visit our website, reddirtagronomy.com, for more information about any of our guests and any of the resources that we talked about today on the podcast. Or send us a note. We have a way to message us right there on the website. For Dr. Josh Lofton and Dr. Brian Arnall, I am not a doctor, but I play one on a podcast from time to time, Dave Deken, and we all want to thank you for listening. The proceeding is a copyrighted recording of Agnow Media LLC 2026. And yes, all rights are reserved.